To the UFS webinar. This webinar is hosted by the National Weather Service, Office of Science and Technology Integration. The goal of this webinar series is to enhance communication and share advancements in all aspects of the UFS, in both research and operational settings. I'm Stacy McKell, and I'm here to coordinate and deliver the webinar. Feel free to contact us at OSTI if you have any comments or suggestions. Also, if you have any recommendations for speakers that you would like to present at this webinar, you can email your recommendations to ufs.modeling@noaa.gov. Okay. Due to the high number of attendees, you will be in listen-only mode during the event. You will not be able to unmute. If you have any questions now or during the event, please submit them on the Google document that will be provided in the chat. Presentations last about 45 minutes, followed by questions and answers for 15 minutes. Type your questions on the Google document during the presentation. Today's presentation will be an epic dive into social science. What is the community of community modeling? Right. Before I get started, I want to just quickly show you how to sign up for the webinar notifications and to view archived information. You will go on to the portal at ufscommunity.org. Scroll down to the events section and you'll see the webinar listed on the page. Archive information is available when you click on UFS webinar series. Scroll down and you'll see the past webinars. Today's speaker is Michael Michaud, and he will be introduced by Leah Dubots and Gina Esco. You ladies can take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much and welcome everyone to today's webinar. I am thrilled to kick this off. From a social science perspective, community modeling is an area rich with potential research topics. We can examine things like how people collaborate across organizations, understand the value propositions and incentives across organizations and sectors, identify user needs, in this case, perhaps forecast or modelers' user needs, and design technology to address them, and of course, nurture the innovation process, of which there is much organizational psychology on how to nurture innovation and so much more. When Leah Dubots and I first talked about co-mentoring a William M. LaPenta intern, we had a very different topic than what you're going to see today. We thought, well, let's generate a logic model identifying how innovations move throughout our community so that we could track and measure the value of this using textual and social science data. It was a very lofty idea. And it turned out that once Dr. Michael, or almost Dr. Michael Michaud, I'm getting ahead, he hasn't defended quite yet, but he's almost there. Once Michael officially joined us, we started thinking about the flow of innovation in much more depth. And we realized that we couldn't quite complete a logic model because we were missing a lot of important information. We realized that in order to answer these questions, we needed to identify who is a member of this community and how to track those innovations. We needed to understand how someone becomes a member of this community. We needed to more broadly define membership and how it functions. And this is where Michael's project came to be, to focus on understanding and defining the community aspects of community modeling. I don't want to give any spoilers because I get just as excited about this topic, but Michael's going to go into a great amount of detail, so I'm going to stop here. But I'm thrilled for all of us to learn more about this today and to learn more about what does community in community modeling mean and how can we foster those social connections into the future. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Leah to introduce Mike more specifically. Leah?
Thanks, Gina, and I'm really excited to introduce Mike. Michael Michaud is a PhD candidate in the Disaster Science and Management program at the University of Delaware. In 2007, he graduated from Linden State College, which is now the Northern Vermont University, with a degree in atmospheric science. He also earned his Master of Education in Educational Leadership and Policy from the University of Utah in 2016. With backgrounds in both the physical and social sciences, he is passionate about integrating knowledge from the social, behavioral, and economic sciences into the weather enterprise. He also sees the importance of building community to promote collaboration, both within the sciences and elsewhere. Michael is also an active member of the American Meteorological Society Board for Societal Impacts. Mike, I'm really excited to hear your presentation. I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you. And thank you so much, Leah and Gina, for introducing me and being mentors for me throughout this project and the last year that we've been working on this. So welcome everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for joining today, and thank you to the UFS community for asking me to present and share a little bit of the work and the project that I've been working on. So today's presentation is titled An Epic Dive into Social Science, What is the Community of Community Modeling? Now I do want to provide a little bit of some context for everyone. As I'm sure many of you know, in the wake of Hurricane Sandy, there was more attention that started shifting to the importance of numerical weather prediction. There was the perception that US models were underperforming compared to others. This led to several calls to action, including an external review of the National Center for Environmental Prediction. The review team suggested simplifying the model suite and leveraging the expertise of the entire modeling community to help build a superior modeling system. Now, most of this, a lot of this work was led by Dr. Bill LaPenta, and I wanted to honor him today a little bit by sharing two of the slides that he used in his introduction to EPIC and some of his presentations. I unfortunately didn't have the honor to meet him, but throughout the internship program and working with many others who have worked with him, I can definitely see his mentorship and his passion continuing through the internship program and many others that are working still today. So to quickly introduce the Unified Forecast System, I'm going to, I believe most people know what that is, since that is the basis of the webinar, but this process really was the birth of the Unified Forecast System, UFS. This system was meant to be a common framework for all Earth system modeling in the United States. It capitalized on a concept called community modeling. The thought was to make all of NOAA's operational code accessible to the public. Anyone would have access to the code and could use the code. The vision was that users could make improvements, which could then get incorporated back into the model, continuously increasing forecast scale. UFS was designed to incorporate 8 Earth modeling components. Currently, only the atmospheric forecasting components are included in the model, but the vision is to expand to all 8 components over time. In 2018, Congress passed a law creating the Earth Prediction Innovation Center, or EPIC, which is tasked with accelerating community development, enhancing the operational modeling system. This includes removing barriers to developing models outside of NOAA, enabling better collaboration between scientists and engineers, and creating a global research model that is accessible to the public. So in short, EPIC is building partnerships with the UFS and with the modeling community to innovate the US forecast models. Which brings us to my project with the EPIC team last summer. As Gina already alluded to, I had 2 main research questions that we wanted to answer. The first is, what is community modeling? We've heard the term used to describe UFS and other modeling systems, but what does that really mean? What does it mean to be a part of a community model? The other question is, how can EPIC and UFS strengthen community modeling? What will it take to engage more people and to get them involved within the community? So as a social scientist, I first wanted to understand what it means to be part of a community more broadly. And you might actually find it to be a surprise that community is not well defined within the academic literature. Most generally, there's 2 components of community, a geographical and a relational component. Geographical is the aspect of being in close proximity with others, whereas relational is the quality and character of human relationships without reference to a location. In other words, it's how people relate to each other. The key aspect really is the relational piece, as simply being in close proximity to others may not necessarily lead to a feeling of community. Instead, many scholars have actually focused on examining what it means to have a sense of community. And this is work that was first proposed by McMillan and Chavez. Their framework includes 4 different parts. First is membership, a feeling of belonging and relating to others within the group. Influence, having a feeling of mattering and making a difference to the group and being important. Integration and fulfillment of needs, members having the necessary resources in the group to achieve their goal. And then also a shared emotional connection, which is a commitment by members of the group to having similar experiences and having similar values as each other. So with a theoretical understanding of what constitutes a community or a sense of community, we can shift focus to community modeling. Unsurprisingly, there's no common definition for community modeling either. Within the atmospheric science field, the climate systems model, which was first developed by NCAR in 1996, was the first that really started to introduce this community model approach. They defined their goals as making the model readily available to and useful by the climate research community, and to actively engage the community in the ongoing process of model development. More recently, the UFS framework has outlined what community modeling includes, but it does not offer a specific definition. It includes the users and the roles that they have, but it doesn't really define what it means to be part of the community. So the focus of both of these definitions really is on the technical framework itself and not necessarily the people that are using it and the people who are part of the community. As we saw in the theoretical community definition, the important part is bringing people together to foster that sense of community. Several of the planning documents for the UFS even identified the need to have a common definition of what it means to be part of the community, but it seems that one was never fully developed. So to answer these questions, we needed to collect data from those that were already part of the community. We decided to use a qualitative, semi-structured key informant interview approach. This basically means that we talked to selected participants that were identified as key stakeholders within the creation of the UFS and EPIC. Interviews lasted about an hour each, and there were 14 total participants that included representatives from all 3 different sectors across the Earth prediction communities, with a large emphasis on the weather community, since that is the piece that's currently in the UFS system right now. I do want to note that we were not able to interview as many people from the private sector as we would have liked, so you might see that their perspective is lacking a little bit in our analysis. The interviews that we conducted focused on asking participants to explain what is community modeling in their own words, their interactions and perceptions of the UFS and EPIC, and the values and expectations of the sectors that they have worked in during their career. And one thing I also want to note about this methodology that we used is that this type of sampling is not intended to provide generalizable perceptions of the overall community, but really focused at the overall creation of the program itself. And I'll talk a little bit more at the end about how to make this a little bit more generalizable in the future. So now we want to try and answer the first question: what is community modeling? And first, I want to share a quote that I thought was very insightful and really introduces the rest of the analysis and kind of makes the whole point of this presentation. The quote is, "It's a unified forecast system in the sense that the code base is a single code base, but it also unifies because it's also unified because they build a community that unifies people." I really think this quote perfectly makes that point, that community modeling is not just about the technical structure, but you need to have that social environment in order for community modeling to happen and for those people to come together to actually do modeling. So breaking it down into the main elements from our interviews of what is community modeling. The 2 overarching areas are the technical pieces and then the social pieces. When we first asked what is community modeling, mostly everyone, with 2 exceptions, went right for the technical aspects on what they thought were needed for technical infrastructure. This included elements of the code being open source, so that way anyone could access it or use it, being open development, where anyone could change the code and play with the code and submit innovations back into the model. Several even called it a sandbox or a play box, where researchers could innovate and play with different tools to improve the model. Most participants also mentioned the importance of being able to run the model across different platforms, and with the benefit of cloud computing more recently as well. One participant even mentioned the example of a community member using an Xbox to run the code to really emphasize the versatility of the code and how it can work in different areas. After comments about the technical aspects, many participants instinctively started to discuss the more social elements about belonging to a community and the need to connect with others within that community as well. So to help organize some of these elements on the social side, we're going to use the theoretical framework that I introduced from Macmillan and Chappis. Within this framework, the first area is membership, which again is the feeling of belonging and relating to others within a group. Participants discuss the importance of having an open community where everyone feels welcome and are working to achieve a common goal. For example, one participant said, "You really miss the power of the community by excluding people." Many indicated that at first they didn't really want to exclude anyone from the community, but there could be some barriers to people who wanted to join the community, such as their technical skills or their computing power, or simply not knowing how to engage with other community members. One actually specifically commented saying that other members wouldn't feel unwelcome, they just might not know how to engage with the wider community. This led to conversations about what's really needed to help build the community, which I'll explain a little bit more in depth later. Despite the openness that almost all of the participants suggested, the majority also started to put boundaries on what it means to actually be an active member. This included ensuring that everyone is contributing to the community and not simply taking from it to advance their own goals, but are actually working to advance the goals for the wider community. One participant commented, "The people that I would like to not see in the community are those who take from the community but are not willing to give back." So overall, from this membership area, what we're seeing is that people want membership to be open to those who are contributing to the community. There might be some additional resources that are needed to kind of break down some of those barriers for interested members. The next area is influence, or the feeling of making a difference to the group, a feeling of being important within the group, then also the impact of the group that the group has on its members itself. One of the biggest issues participants raise, especially from the academic sector, is the importance of members being able to influence the direction of the community and the overall shared goals that they have. The question of who has governance over the UFS community was an important question that they had, and it seemed to be a crucial element in their sense of belonging within the community. Specifically from the academic sector, there was the sense that NOAA had greater control and was looking out for NOAA's needs rather than the needs of the whole community. Some of the NOAA participants also talked about this and how important it is for NOAA to provide guidance, but also help build the community into a space where everyone feels that they do have influence. For example, this quote here that one participant mentioned, "NOAA has the nucleus and has to support the community. They don't work for us, but we have the obligation to sort of be a convener." NOAA participants really recognize that they're sharing NOAA's code, but they can't ask the community to work for them. Everyone needs to work together to kind of meet these common goals that are good for everybody. There's also the theme of individual influence and how individual members feel influenced by others. As one participant said, "In order for a community to thrive, everyone has to get something out of it. Otherwise, they're going to stop showing up." Several participants who are outside the weather forecasting focus noted that since their particular areas are not yet included in the modeling suite, they're not really yet influenced by the community. However, they are optimistic that once those processes get wrapped in, they will have a bigger part within the community. There's also a sense of trepidation with the research to operations process, with questions on how one will influence the other and how they're going to connect, which actually leads us into our next area. The next area is the integration and fulfillment of needs. In order to have a sense of community, members need to be able to come together with other members to share information and meet the mission of the community. Since the UFS and EPIC community is still developing, participants mainly express the needs that they have to fully integrate into the community model. Some of these things are things that have been developed, some are things that are currently being developed. A lot of this does also include the technical aspects like code development, trainings, and workshops on how to use the code. There were some specific requests to better understand the science behind why some of the code works. There's also a need for developing structures for the community and identifying the processes that need to happen. And I pulled out 2 quotes here that I want to share. And I know that they're a little bit long, but what I really want to emphasize is the historical way that modeling has been, which is using small focus groups of people who sometimes have issues connecting the research to the operational models. And I think this really emphasizes the point that this is a new culture that's building, that it's all one system, everyone's working together. So it really needs to kind of build that new culture. This means that there's needs to be ways for those who are working on different sections of the model to connect with each other and share information. And this brings us to the next point, which is building infrastructure for members to share information with each other. Participants wanted a way to share what works, what doesn't work, and things that they might be interested in trying. By creating these structures, like having conferences, workshops, and discussion boards, it helps emphasize the importance of bringing people together and building a stronger sense of community where people can continue to work with each other, even when they're not seeing each other. The last component of a sense of community is that all members share an emotional bond around the community and with each other. All the participants that I talked to agree that members need to work towards a common goal in order for a community to thrive. I've mentioned this several times throughout the analysis, that common goal is really essential. This then raised the importance of building trust between members and recognizing the value of the individuals who are contributing to the community. As one participant said, it's not like you can just toggle a switch. There has to be desire, trust, and acceptance on all parties to some level to make this successful. Another added, coming together and sharing ideas, discussing priorities, and then coming up with plans to work collaboratively is needed in order to make timely advances in the science. Participants also recognize the need to build community together, working towards that common goal. This means having a shared value system and a shared culture that really connects everyone and everyone can agree on. And finally, many also discuss how the different sectors within the weather, water, climate enterprise have different values and priorities, which can definitely create a division when trying to build common connection in that shared culture. So for example, participants from the academic sector value autonomy and they're responsible for creating publications, attracting students, and bringing research funding. The government is primarily focused on operations and meeting their congressionally mandated mission that they have, while also being good stewards of public funding. The private sector has a little bit more flexibility in what they do, and they really want to provide the best services that they can for clients. I also heard many opinions on the perceptions of the different sectors and what may or may not be truthful. One participant even called out that there's also a lot of assumptions between the sectors that are not always true. Someone in one sector may make an assumption about something that's happening in a different sector, not realizing it may not be true. These differences really can be barriers to creating that shared emotional connection between members, and really should be addressed to ensure that there is a strong community. A few participants did actually call out that despite having the different values and different interests, everyone within the community really is focused on trying to improve forecasting to really help the public overall. So taking a step back, it was really enlightening to see that everyone first mentioned the technical aspects first, but then given time to talk through their definition, they really focused on those social pieces. There's been so much attention and money that's been placed on the technical aspects over the last couple of years, but there hasn't been that much in terms of community development. So moving forward, and this really is the main point of this project and this presentation, is that there needs to be a focus on developing both the social aspects as well as the technical aspects. And as two participants stated very well in these quotes that I want to read, we need to invest in tools that bring the community together, to organize and cultivate this community. It's not going to come together on its own. And another added, innovation does not happen with code and seminars. It needs to be creative. It needs to be creative community collaboration, which is a good long-term goal. The technical and the social side really do help inform each other, and they help build on each other. From the social elements, we can learn what users need, which can then be developed. The technical aspects can also support the social network by building the different pieces of knowledge that members are using and coming together with. So from this analysis, we are in the process of drafting a definition for community modeling. But we've actually recognized that there might need to be two different definitions. There's the community model itself, which consists of the code base, which is accessible to the world. And then there's the process of community modeling, which includes all of the different social components that I just mentioned. We're still in the process of developing this language, so keep an eye out for more details coming out soon. But now we're going to shift focus a little bit and focus on using this analysis and our working definition from understanding what it means to be part of the UFS community and turn to the recommendations on how to really help build a stronger community for EPIC and the UFS. So based on the perceptions on what we saw from our analysis and specifically from one participant, we've determined that you can actually look at EPIC and UFS as trying to build a community of practice around the UFS system. And why is that important to recognize? Well, there is a large body of literature that focuses specifically on how to develop and maintain communities of practice that the community can use. The definition of community of practice itself is also evolving. One of the more recent explanations by Wegner, who actually coined the term, defined it as groups of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. In order for a community of practice, the groups need to have some kind of shared domain. In this case, it is modeling, earth modeling. They then build community by creating relationships and learning from each other. Given the attendance at AMS and other conferences, we can clearly see how people are interacting and building off of each other. And finally, practice. Members are developing experience and knowledge together. This is exactly what EPIC hopes to achieve within the UFS framework. Now, it's also important to recognize that there are likely to be multiple communities of practice within this larger community of practice within the UFS community and EPIC, given that modeling can be quite different between 8 different UFS components and even the timescale components that can be quite different. So it's really important to recognize that there could be many different of these smaller communities working together, but then those smaller communities need to work together with the larger community to bring everything together. So to support the work as a community of practice, the community can actually use a framework to help develop, like this one that I have up here by Smith and McKean. And it outlines how to help build and maintain a thriving community of practice. And I really want to emphasize the point that you must build and then continue to maintain a community. Building consists of identifying the different people and communities who might be interested in being members, facilitating and managing their entry and exploration into the community, and then also providing technical support for what they actually need to do their work. And then also building that shared culture where all members are feeling included and feel like they have some kind of influence. Once this is done, the work's still not over. You must continue to maintain the community. This includes understanding the hurdles to members that are already interested in the community or already working in the community, and other hurdles to possible new members, people who are interested but don't really know how to engage, they don't know how to get involved. It means making sure that members can easily share and create knowledge. It also is important to measure the value that the community has externally, so on modeling and forecasting in general. And then also the internal value that people have towards within the community itself. And all of these different pieces help to build that trust, which we've already seen is very important. But it's important to keep building that trust and bringing in different members. We've also discussed the importance of motivating people and how to get people to want to be part of the community. And finally, you need to consistently evaluate the community to see how things are changing over time. membership will change, needs will change. So it's really important to make sure that the community is changing along with what's happening with members. So it's really an important, crucial element to make sure that the community is building and thriving. Many participants mentioned that they had great visions for what they'd like to see from the EPIC program and the UFS community. A lot of people were very optimistic about the future of community modeling. Several said that it's actually the future of forecasting. So from these conversations that we've had and with the model that I just showed from Smith and McKean, we've proposed 4 overarching recommendations. And we really want to make the point that these aren't necessarily sequential recommendations, but they should be considered an ongoing process. Building and developing community is not just a one-time process, but takes ongoing support and effort. So starting with these recommendations will kind of help provide that framework for EPIC and UFS to continue to develop and to grow. First one that I'll mention is increasing transparency and communication. In our interviews, we actually heard that there was a lot of confusion about what is the difference between UFS and EPIC. Pretty much every person that we talked to, of the 14 participants, when asked what's the difference between UFS and EPIC, had a little bit of a different answer. So it really shows that there's still some confusion about what is the difference and who is doing what. Over the last year, EPIC has had to limit its communication due to the contracting process that they had. But now that it's complete, we do recommend that the EPIC and UFS uses a shared communication system and to make sure that they are dispersing information the same. This could include information about what is the UFS and distinctly explain how EPIC plans to offer value within the community, both with the technical and the social elements. Any messaging that comes out from UFS or EPIC should be consistent and easily accessible through various media as well. One of the things that, since this wasn't a generalizable project, we still don't really understand who are all of the different people who make up the UFS community. Is it people from academia? Is it people from the private sector? Is it mostly government? We still don't really know. So it's important that information about the UFS and EPIC is dispersed widely between social media, possibly having ways for people to opt into information if they're interested, into the newsletters that are there. But it's really important to make sure that you're spreading out the communication so that way anyone who might be interested in contributing to the community can come into the community. Let's see. The next piece is building platforms to connect members. And this is something that we kind of alluded to throughout the presentation. One of the biggest desires is for members is to have a way to engage with each other, both in person and virtually. Some of the specific examples that people included were having in-person workshops, having virtual workshops, having trainings, having online discussion boards where people can post comments and get feedback, having live code assistance, and then conferences where people can share the work that they've done and the research that they've done. Several did note the previous EPIC workshop and desired more similar opportunities. And I'll add that the UFS and EPIC actually do have another workshop coming up, which is the 2022 Unifying Innovations and Forecasting Capabilities workshop, which is coming up in July. There are also a lot of comments asking for connections that are similar to the way that people who use the weather research and forecasting or WRF model, where members can ask questions to the community and get ongoing feedback from each other. EPIC and UFS can really utilize some of the similar technology so that the way the community is already familiar with it, which has the added benefit of being able to adapt quickly. It's also vital to get member input on these tools, as they're the ones who are going to be using them. The tools should meet all of the different user needs, and it should be accessible and intuitive for all of the different members that are part of the community. Next is building motivation, motivating participation within the community. So from the community of practice framework, and specifically from what was mentioned from several participants, it really is important to make sure that there are different ways to motivate people. This does lead to a stronger sense of community and increased outcomes from the community as a whole. Given the different values and success metrics across the sectors, this is not an easy task though. There will likely need to be different targeted initiatives for different sub-communities within the larger community. First, in line with the framework, emerging leaders that have been that could be used to help motivate and guide their specific communities. While they might not need to be official employees or specific members of EPIC or the UFS, they should be recognized in other ways. Leaders who are well trusted and could be considered ambassadors to the UFS, kind of like how AMS has their fellows program, which are scientists that are well recognized in their field and help build that community. In this way, it will help recognize the leaders within the broader discipline, and they can also serve as mentors who will help build trust within their own communities, which will then help build trust in the larger community as a whole. Second, it's important to recognize the contribution of individuals to the community. This can include different awards that could be given out to members who make significant contributions, either in areas of innovation, submitting code, or just mentorship and being welcoming to the community. These awards could be helpful to motivate people, specifically maybe in the private and public sector, but the academic sector may have need some additional recognition as well. As we said, most of academia places high value on publications. To help motivate those from academia and also increase knowledge sharing, EPIC and UFS may want to consider creating new ways for people to share their information, whether that's a trade journal or an academic journal, where innovations and other scientific advancements can be published. There's many different journals that are out there, but having a central, easily accessible, open access publication could really focus the attention on what's happening within community modeling and make it more accessible to anyone who wants to be part of the community as well. Finally, there's also a need to support, engage, help support and encourage motivation through funding. Many of the participants said that they were hoping there would be more funding provided, and that's what EPIC was for. But currently, unfortunately, funding is pretty limited. So all avenues should be explored to see how funding opportunities can be used to help leverage interest and engagement in the community. However that could come about, whether that is from government or private-public partnerships, some ways to really help build funding for people who are interested in doing research within this area. And then the last piece here is having ongoing rigorous assessment. As I noted in the framework, communities of practice need to be monitored for evolution. The needs of members will shift over time, so it's vital that the community shifts with those needs. In addition to those shifting needs, there should be a constant pulse on the sense of community. As we previously mentioned, the report is based on non-generalizable information. So to get a better sense of what's actually happening in the community, you really need to take a deeper look at what's happening and kind of if people have a sense of community and if they feel part of the community. Using the expertise from social science, you really can dive into some of those. There have been some metrics that have been developed to measure a sense of community and kind of index if people have a sense of community. So it's really important to kind of bring in those social science pieces and to take an initial baseline of the community, so that way there could be yearly assessments to closely monitor the community's progress. Data should be collected and shared to better understand who makes up the community, who feels included, and what groups are feeling excluded or aren't included in the community. Over time, there should be an increase in the sense of community, which will lead to the best possible outcomes. And with that, I will go ahead and wrap up my presentation. And I just want to take a couple minutes to again thank Leah and Gina for all of the work that they've done with me over the last year. It's been an incredible effort, and I really greatly appreciate the mentorship that they've provided for me. Also want to thank all of the people that we interviewed, the 14 participants. Definitely made a big impact in all of the work we did here, and I believe there's a couple on the call today, so thank you very much for taking your time to talk to me. And also, again, I want to thank the LaPenta internship. It's been an amazing opportunity, and it's allowed so much research to come out of this. So I believe at this point, we can see if there are questions in the the document. But I also wanted to throw up one quick slide here. If you don't have a question or something, feel free to put in that document. What do you think? Are there elements that were missing in community modeling? And what makes you feel part of the community? Do you feel part of the community? We have quite a few people, it looks like 60 attendees on the call right now. So what makes you feel part of the UFS and EPIC community right now? I'd love to have your thoughts as we work to keep continuing this research a little bit. So feel free to throw that into the document as well.
Mike, thank you so much. That was an amazing presentation. Lots of information, and we really appreciate it. So yes, as Mike said, please put your questions in the documents. You do have a few questions up there already. Would you like to share the screen and bring up the documents?
Sure, I think I have to stop sharing this window and then pull up the other window that I have.
Okay. Then you'll be able to read the questions and answer, and hopefully you have answers for the questions that you asked.
Great, so let me see if I can.
If you can't, then I would not mind sharing mine.
Can you see that now? Perfect.
We
okay.
see it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the first question, it seems that the success of other community model efforts, such as the use of AWORK WRF throughout the US and beyond, would be a rich place to go to learn about how that works, what it means, and what are the best practices. Curious to know why the approach was not explored. So a lot of the people that we did interview have been, they were kind of instrumental in developing UFS and EPIC. They've also been really active in some of these other areas. So while we really focused on kind of the pieces of the UFS, because that was the specific context that we were trying to see how to help motivate people, they brought a lot of their expertise from working in those different areas. A lot of the conversations that we were having were about, well, my experience within this community or my experience within this community really helped to kind of lead where they were, what they were thinking about the future of the UFS and EPIC. So I think it would be great to dive more into those a little bit more for future research efforts. Question 2, and if there's something that I didn't answer, please feel free to go back in and add an extra comment under the question if you would like a little bit more clarification. Question 2, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, many organizations and community members were forced to go online to continue to get a sense of community. Considering, for the most part, the community modeling community is geographically separated, distant, and likely most virtual, are there other social science or public health studies that might point to best practices or recommendations on how to build and maintain a community in a virtual space? I love this question. So within the last 2 weeks or so, Leah, Gina, and I have actually met with a psychologist who focuses on who's focused on virtual communities and is kind of doing some work in in-person communities too. And the conversation that we had in the last 2 weeks was that there really is no such thing as just a virtual community or just I'm sorry, not just a virtual community, but there's no such thing as just an in-person community. All communities are going to have some of those virtual elements, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic. So there's quite a few areas where there's more research that's going on. I didn't have time to share in the presentation, but I shared the sense of community framework that we talked about. There's also a virtual sense of community framework that's a little bit different. It's a little bit less focused on the influence piece, but it's still important. So there are different areas of social science that are out there that we can definitely pull in. Some of those we've already looked into and are using to kind of craft our definitions. So that there's a lot there, but there's still a lot more that needs to be developed. Question 3, how are you reducing friction between the web aspects such as data access, community interaction, and public-facing documents? I'm not sure if I can fully answer that question. I might ask if Leah or Gina might have something to add here. Since I'm not necessarily part of the EPIC team, I'm not fully aware of all of the different public-facing documents that are out there. So I don't know if I can skip that question for now. Unfortunately, I don't really have any much that I can provide for that, since I'm not necessarily involved with those pieces.
Yeah, Michael, I'm just here to support you. If someone has, whoever asked that question, if you could provide us a little more context, or what we can do is pass that question along to the EPIC program team and we can get an answer at a later time.
Great, thank you, Gina. Question 4. To what extent did you include other open source communities in your research? Obviously, the Linux community is key, but there have been some really interesting ones in the life sciences. And that's a good question. Due to kind of the scope that I had with the internship, I didn't have an opportunity to really kind of look out towards a lot of those more open source communities. That's definitely an area that needs to be developed more. I did try to look at other community models that were, I believe there's some economic models. There were environmental, like tree study, tree and bug interaction type stuff that I did look into a little bit. Really, a lot of the focus was still on the technical elements. There wasn't as much on the social elements. So I definitely could look into those other communities as well to see if there's been other research there. And the next question related to Q1, to the first question, Unidata is another example of mirology of universities coming together to share software, support, and innovation at the same. Can EPIC leverage WRF users and Unidata communities? And yeah, I think there's still a lot that can be investigated. This is just kind of the first look at what does it mean to be a community model. And I think there's so much more that can be done to dive into that. As Gina said at the beginning, it's kind of a rich area for social science to better understand how people are coming together to use some of these technologies. So there's a lot that can be done. Let's see, and I think we went back to this question. I think somebody filled in some comments here. Let's see, one of the EMPs for online communities is reducing friction in the community web interface for communications with members, sharing results in community created items, accessing files, etc. Yeah, I'm not sure if I have a lot that I can really provide with that at this point. That wasn't necessarily my focus with this project. But again, I think we can definitely follow back up with that to get a little bit more information there.
Hey, Mike, I can help you out with this one actually. So we are working, EPIC is working very closely with the UFS community to figure out how we can better communicate on the web, how we can make sure that more data is accessible. So this is definitely something that I've been talking with Linda Taylor a lot about, who's the UFS Communications and Outreach co-chair right now. So this is definitely something that's on our radar and something that we are collaborating on closely, so that it's a lot clearer, things are easier to access, you're able to find what you're looking for. So I think that's what that question was trying to get to. So let me know if that answered your question or not.
Looks like somebody is currently typing in a response. If you're custom building it, can you make it available for other communities of practice?
That is a good question. I think that, maybe the framework, it might be something that might be able to be applied, but I'm not sure if like the actual infrastructure would be able to translate to another community. But that's not necessarily something I had thought about before, so it's something we can explore.
Yeah, and I'll add that is one thing too that a few different of the participants mentioned that like WRF has some of those elements of the community that's already built, kind of leveraging using that structure to build out for other communities. So hopefully that should be possible. Let's see. So we have another question coming in, but I'll come to the comments here. So other elements we're missing. Let's see, someone said shared goals are great, but buy-in from other community members to host activities, advance side quests, and still meeting general goals. Yeah, that's definitely a piece of it. There needs to, from what we've seen, there needs to be that kind of overarching goal. But there can be some the smaller goals that people are coming with that still kind of advance that general goal. One of the big things that kind of the boundaries that people were putting around membership was that they didn't want someone just to kind of go in a different direction, kind of detract away from that common goal. So the importance of having those goals, but kind of all going towards that main goal. And then what makes you feel part of the community, common interests and vocabulary. That's definitely, did hear that a little bit, but it's definitely an important note to make. Another question up top here, related to question 4. Can't quite read it with there we go. Lots of good literature on the development and Linux community that could be instructive for Epic UFS. Yeah, that would be great. I didn't get a chance to look into that literature. So if you're willing to send it my way, please feel free to do so. Any other questions or comments? Let's see if we have any other additions up top. I think so.
I don't think anyone else put any questions. Any more questions or comments? Again, Mike, that was a really great presentation. We really appreciate it. Lots of information. And we'll keep this questionnaire open. So if anybody wants to reference it and put in more questions, then they're definitely free to do that. And then we can let you know at any time what the questions are, and you can respond to them accordingly. Okay.
Great. And yeah, I'll definitely keep an eye on it. So if someone comes in and wants to add another question or comments, I'll definitely try to respond in the next couple of days. Okay.
Most definitely. And I'd like to let everybody know also that Mike was recommended. So if you all have any recommendations for the UFS webinar, for anyone to, if you're interested in hearing anyone give a webinar, please feel free to email ufs.community@noaa.gov. And we'll consider your recommendations. Okay, doesn't look like anybody else is putting anything on the questionnaire, so thank you so much. And thank you, Leah and Gina. We really appreciate your input and your help.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having us, and great job, Michael.
Great job. Absolutely.
Thank you everyone for coming today. I definitely appreciated sharing this work with everybody.
Mm-hmm. We really appreciate you. And if that is, no one else has any questions, then I guess we can adjourn. Thank you so much again, and see you next month. See everyone next month. Okay. Thanks, Mike.